So YouTube changed its format, screwy, and soon I'll be doing a video with New to Christ, so check his channel. Still going through the messages, trying to sort stuff out. I'm still in the middle of reading 3 different books, so those people who sent me a book, don't worry, I'm getting through it. I don't want to remark on anything yet, because I've been jumping from one to one to one to one, different ones. But I really appreciate those. I actually dig all of them. For the person who's coming to Chicago, please send me a message. And I pretty much got the Charlemagne mustache going right here, because when I shaved my beard down to a goatee, I accidentally took out this part, so I got the Charlemagne or Southern General look. But I wanted to talk on something which is kind of irritating. Oh yeah, I'm naked today. And it's this. There's a program that the History Channel did. And I rewatched it for the 2nd time. And it made my blood boil even more. So it's about Constantine. They show Constantine as this very agitable, whiny guy. Everything they say in there, if you listen to the words the narrator is saying, is true, and the events and what took place. But then they add on all this stuff heavily implied, and the way the actor acts, that's ridiculous and totally ahistorical. They show Constantine as like a frustrated Michael Palin who's always screaming, and who's like a fanatic who's like trying to pray to God and commanding God to do things. And no, Constantine was born to a general, and I believe it was a slave or a dancing girl or something like that. People are going to equate that with Theodore. It's not Theodore. He was born of Italic blood, Latin blood, basically. This is before the Germans. This is over 100 years before the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Huns, the Lombards, the Franks, before any of those came through, or even the marauding Normans and Vikings that raped, pillaged, and plundered, which brought blonde hair and blue eyes to Italy. Now, yeah, I know through genetics there's naturally occurring blonde hair and blue eyes, just like throughout the Middle East there is also. But Constantine wasn't a pale-skinned Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxons were still in Denmark at the time. Denmark and Sweden and Finland. They didn't even get to Britain yet to rename it England, Angleland, and Wessex and Sussex, which is South Saxon, West Saxon, Essex is East Saxon, dividing up into the kingdom of Northumbria and Kent and all that crap. Constantine was born to a general in Dalmatia, that's modern-day Serbia. He grew up around Londinium in Britain, which is modern-day England. There were always fights from the Picts and the Celts and all these people, and the piracy that was happening from the Celts in Ireland. And Britain had a long history of revolts, like Boudica. He was on he was on the barbarian edge of the empire, and then he swept through. Now, many historians criticize Constantine for being a very cold, shrewd man who was an opportunist. But even the critics say he was valiant in battle. He was brave, not fanatical, and that he was a great warrior. People who were pro-Constantine, many times Christians, try to play these things down and say, well, it was to God that why he won the battles. The image in the sky they show is a meteorite. We don't know what happened in the sky. Now, there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, Eusebius doesn't report it until this point. Well, there was other writers besides Eusebius. What did he see in the sky? We're not sure. People sometimes say a cross. People sometimes say a cross connected with a P shape. Sometimes people say the Chi-Rho. It's probably the Chi-Rho. That became the battle standard. Now, was he just a plain opportunist doing this to appease what had already become a very Christian empire with only the very elitists and these elitist pagans that loved torturing Christians? No. It's half true, but it's not the truth. Christianity was only about 10% in around the year 300. It was only 10% of the Roman Empire, which is a big minority. Imagine if during the 1950s you had 10% of the United States as communist. Now, the 1950s, with the attitude of the 1950s towards communism, if you had 10% of the population as communist, and them being thrown in jail all the time. Well, Rome was even worse. Rome, they slaughtered the Christians. Diocletian, the emperor that came right before Constantine, he had the biggest, you can't, Nero, all these other people don't even come close to Diocletian. He wanted to wipe the Christians off the face of the earth. Because it was a slave religion. It was very secret, which, if you're going to get murdered for what you believe in, you would be being secret about it. They didn't fight in war. If you read all of the pre-Constantinian Christians, and even the ones around Constantine time, there is no entry. The first one to talk about Christians being allowed to fight in war is Augustine with Holy War. Throughout the whole time, you couldn't be part of the army. Why? We know there's Christians that were in the army, like St. Moritz, but they try to make it a point. Why? Because first of all, you had to kill people, and Christianity was against the killing of anybody. Second of all, God could strike somebody dead, but you weren't allowed to. You had to turn the other cheek. Second of all, the Mars was the god of the military. It was Mars, Jupiter, and Minerva that were the three main gods of Rome. Even today, they have in the army, they still have prayers. In the American army, even though we're secular, and all the armed forces, they have their own prayer, which is a very secular prayer. I know that, but in Rome, it wasn't. It was Mars, the god of war, and Jupiter, and then Minerva. Depends on which element, which strata, or who you were in Roman society, of which one of these gods you worshipped. And then there was local cults, which the Romans didn't care about, the Eleusinian mysteries, or if you were worshiping Apollo, and Mithraism was big in the Roman army. These were fine, because it wasn't Christianity. Christianity was shocking, because these were people who wouldn't fight, who would rather die than kill, who, many of them, and Christianity wasn't, it was, the church was united, but there were other Christians outside of the church that called themselves Christians, like Manichaeans, Gnostics, Marcionites. Many of these groups took vows of celibacy, which was very offensive to Rome. They thought the world's going to die off and the barbarians are going to come and you're weakening us. Which many people try to make that argument, even though the Western Roman Empire didn't fall until 410, and even then it's debatable, because that's when Rome got invaded and they pulled back from Britain, but there was still a presence in there, and you still had Rome until 497 in the West. In the East, the Roman Empire went on, and the first major blow that it took was from the Arabs coming up, what we now know as the Islamic conquest, which me and New to Christ are going to challenge that, which was in 7th and 8th centuries, and it really didn't make a huge dent until the 8th centuries, when the Persians and the Romans had exhausted themselves through vicious wars. Why did Constantine enact tolerance? Because people want to say he didn't become a Christian immediately. He came to Christianity slowly over time, which is how it happened with me. I didn't have a Damascus Road experience. I've never seen angels. I've never seen the face of God. Well, nobody has seen the face of God. There's none of that. Even the coins, you see, there's some Christian art, he was a man struggling with it. Like G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis. If you didn't have a Damascus Road experience, that's ridiculous. Why did he enact this Edict of Tolerance? Well, either he believed that you shouldn't be slaughtering people for their beliefs, because the Christians were 10% and they were on the low stratum of society. These weren't people they had to appease because the Senate was pissed at them and all this stuff. What are you doing? You could look at it this way. Diocletian, when he started getting older, he named a co-emperor. The empire was actually in fourths at the time that Constantine started to conquer it. It was Maxentius. The two greatest enemies of two people Diocletian hated was Constantine's father and Constantine, and Christians. And these emperors were cutting out sheep's intestines and splitting open doves to try to divine the will of the gods and everything. And Constantine could have easily looked at that. And look at Britain. Look how far away it was away. We see Irenaeus of Lyon in the beginning, in the late 2nd century, early 3rd century, already in France. And we know there's Christians up all that way. It was the farther away from the persecution, the better. So Constantine might have already been a Christian. And he looked at, or he could have said, Christians aren't doing me any harm. They're not a harmful people. And that it's an enemy to my enemy. When he started conquering in the sign of Christianity, wait a minute, one God, one empire, one emperor. Very debatable, very speculative, if you want to look at it pragmatic, where, without any type of spiritual stuff in there. Now, the documentary has it painted just, totally differently of Constantine's character and everything. Then you look at, I was always calling him Licinius, but they call him Lucanus or whatever, because I've just read this stuff. Eusebius, all the other reports, and even modern authors talking about that. So you see something written down, sometimes you don't know how to pronounce it. They show him as, they don't say it, it's heavily implied. So if you're not actually listening close to the narration and basically holding off on what the characters are acting like, it basically shows Constantine in Nicaea reciting the Nicene Creed, which Nicene Creed wasn't really Nicene Creed until Constantinople. They show him reciting the Nicene Creed as these men rush in and kill Lucanus and his son. And then later they talk about his sister being killed. And it's almost like a mafia don. It's almost like the ending of The Godfather. What is one thing that was strange that Constantine did? He let Lucanus go. Now, in ancient Rome, for the pagans, you know what they used to do? If you got betrayed or if you lost favor, you could commit suicide and you'd save your family. But if you were killed, your family, your land, their slaves, anybody related to you was wiped from the face. It's the term wiping your seed from the face of the earth. Now, when Constantine and Lucanus, because he actually fought for Constantine, took over the East, this was a time when the Christians were being horribly persecuted. What did Lucanus do? He slaughtered even more Christians. He was an enemy to Christianity. And he tried to kill Constantine. And when they got into a battle, and Constantine's army rose up the battle stand of the Cairo, the PX thing, in case people don't know. Lucanus started, there's one account where Lucanus was praying to Jupiter, screaming to Jupiter. He screamed Jupiter's name and an arrow hit him. And then he screamed to Mars, another arrow hit him. ran back to his villa. What did Constantine do? Did he kill him and destroy his whole family? No, it was mercy. That's very odd. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the Senate didn't like him, because he was too merciful. One thing that's reported with Constantine, because he won and lost battles, but there's never one reported instance of decimation. Decimation, where we get that word from, every 10th man. They'd count down every 10th man, and then everybody had to beat them to death. One thing Diocletian did is he'd kill everybody in the family line. So it actually went up to one of his generals, because the general had a few sons in the army, so he wiped out good soldiers and his general. And burned the field, salted the earth of the villas that they lived in. So Constantine didn't do these things, so he's very merciful. Strange thing for a Roman emperor. This is why they didn't like it. Now, we could go into the reasons why the Romans didn't like Christianity in the 1st and 2nd centuries, because it was secretive. They thought it was sorcery. They thought, drinking blood, eating flesh, drowning babies, basically baptism and the Eucharist misunderstood. And then everybody calling themselves brother and sister, so they thought, oh, this is incest. So there's crazy things. You're going to read this in Celsus and Pliny and Tacitus, all idiots. So they show Lucanus being murdered, and they heavily imply and basically say it. And then they wind up saying, oh, Constantine's sister never forgave Constantine for what he did, because Lucanus was married to Constantine's sister. They say, oh, he didn't murder him because it was his sister. No. No Roman would have, they'd wipe out the sister too. I mean, these weren't hard family units. You married people who could get you power. Marriage wasn't done for love, and families weren't done for love. Actually, families are noted in the Roman Empire for killing each other. Just look at Livia, the wife of Augustine, who actually had her sons murdered and her grandchildren murdered. So it's not, oh, out of sisterly love. It actually was out of mercy. Lucanus actually had to convert to Christianity. He's, oh crap, I can't do, so it was very pragmatic for him. Whether he was a Christian in his heart, probably not. Not what the source suggests, but I'm not going to judge the guy. Who would have killed him after he tries to destroy the Christians, and, the soldiers who were under him, who were pagan, who worshipped Mars, see this guy who they thought, hey, this guy's finally going to get rid of Constantine. And we got the strength of the military, and we go about fighting and taking over and all this kind of stuff, and it's Mars, and have all these brawls and everything. Because already the blood sport had come under criticism, and the brothels had come under criticism, right, when Christians could actually speak their mind. They were actually speaking against it beforehand. So they're like, this is going to change the world. Wound up changing the world, because blood sports and brothels were pretty much pushed out, and brothels went underground instead of being all over the place. What's more likely? That Constantine, who keeps pardoning people, and it looks better if Lucanus is alive in Greece and just sitting there, and he's just got him nullified, or if he goes in and kills him. What's the chance that Lucanus could resurrect a revolt after all this stuff started, after all these changes started taking place? After the Romans, who were pretty superstitious, that's why they were always cutting open goats and doves and stuff like that, who see this guy who's saying he's speaking for the one God of this sect that was seen as witchcraft and sorcery. And actually the first witches and the first atheists were the Christians. That's what they were called. They were called atheists and sorcerers and witches. They see this thing sweeping from the north, from this northern frontier. It's Roman, and coming down and changing everything. It didn't rise up in Antioch or Jerusalem or Alexandria, any of these strongholds that you'd think it would be. It's obscure Christianity coming through and going the other way. So was it pissed off people who thought Lucanus betrayed them? Or would it be somebody who's modeling the empire after mercy and unanimous law and freedom of religion? First freedom of religion in Western civilization was Constantine. Oh, Constantine banned the cults. And no. He redirected funds to build churches, and this irritated a lot of people, because it was a lot of these temples had, it's called Deus Ex Machina in there. They had little machines where the gods could talk to you, or they'd spill out holy water or holy sand, or a different amount of marbles to show you your destiny, or you had the Oracle at Delphi who would for money would breathe in poisonous gas and murmur crazily, and then old men would tell you what it was. Now you didn't have that. Now you just had the church to go and pray to. And okay, another thing with tithing. New Testament says to give hilariously. There's no 10% rule in the New Testament. And most of the people who were Christians, and it's not the form of Christianity in modern day America. It looks nothing like that at that time. It actually looks like Orthodoxy or ancient Catholicism. So there was no wealth and health prosperity gospel. These were poor, slaves, women. So it wasn't for money. So now the religious people in charge weren't aristocrats for centuries, from families that existed for centuries that were rich and influential and beautiful, and they'd have the sexy sibyls of Apollo and all this crap, or the vestal virgins, then would be married off after the term was done, or then you'd have the head one that was, you had these poor ragged people who, at the Council of Nicaea, you had people missing limbs, fingers. You had people with the bones falling out of their feet because their feet were basically cooked meat, scarred, their eyes gouged out. Now these are the people who were speaking for this God who was slaughtered on a cross by a Roman, by who was it, Tiberius, that was the emperor at the time, and it was, I could be wrong about being Tiberius. Or was it Augustus? Holy crap, how did I get that wrong? I know Augustus was at the birth. Well, okay, forget it, doesn't matter. Under Pontius Pilate, a Roman system, now you have this slain Christ, this Jew, these people who revolted during, in 70 AD and then 135 with the Bar Kokhba, who were causing all these problems. What's more likely? Now, seeing that the historical account says nothing about Constantine killing him, I mean, where's even the suspicious things of, maybe Constantine killed him? That's like if somebody says, well, it's all just myth, JFK wasn't shot by a communist sympathizer, wasn't shot by Oswald. Oswald actually wasn't a sympathizer. He was actually, because you can look at, Sarah Palin and people like J.C. Watts and Condoleezza Rice. It was one of these weird fanatical, he was actually a black guy who was a Republican who couldn't stand JFK. What? I mean, are people going to be saying that in 1,500 years? Nothing of a historical account, just conspiracy theory, because they have to play Constantine as a fanatic, and as, I don't know, and I got to look to which gods are going to, they have to portray him like that, because if they actually portrayed him as he was, you'd have people say, well, that's just pro-Christianity. Well, sometimes there were Christians that helped society, that actually reunited things and civilized things and actually brought in things like, oh, wait, you can't have blood sport. Oh, well, since that's against our modern sensibilities, well, then it couldn't have been a Christian that said that. It's not like our society grows out of Christianity, out of 1,500 years of Christianity. No, of course not. Ended abortions, and, it wasn't, oh, gosh. Or that hospitals didn't come from the Hospitallers, it wasn't the Christians that first started actually actively helping people as a charity. Because in Rome, if you were sickly or stupid or non-athletic, it's because you were cursed. And helping you would just weaken people. You were taking stuff away from great people. Time that you could be helping the great people, but you're helping these people who are just wretched. Christianity stands that on its head. So if you portray Charlemagne or Constantine as they actually were, you get what looks like to be, in some people's eyes, and this is how they translate, pro-Christian and pro-Western, which is lunacy. You should just present things as they are And if people have a problem with it, they have a problem with it. It's like if Christians were to say, oh, Christopher Hitchens, he actually murdered people, and he was a psychopath, and he didn't know what he was talking about, and he, was constantly eating shit. And I mean, no, Christopher Hitchens had many virtues. And he was an honest man. But if academia and these, the media actually comes to a point where it doesn't like, let's say it turns Christian, which I hope it doesn't. Right now we're at kind of a liberal end of things. Actually it's toppling over into weird Protestantism now with recent media, which is even scarier, combining right-wing fanaticism with sappy liberal irrationalism, which is why I don't like the Republicans or the Democrats. This is silly. Are they gonna say Darwin didn't come up with evolution, that it was actually, Billy Sunday or Billy Graham in a few hundred years or 1,000 years, if it swings back to being religious? If Islam comes in, are they going to try to say Abraham Lincoln was a Muslim? Distorting the past because of how you feel or how you think should have been is ridiculous. I actually saw a program where they said Martin Luther King was a Democrat. He was a Republican. Again, not a Republican, was a Democrat. You can't just lie about stuff, or, we don't like this, so we have to, even though we're stating all the facts, it might be seen as pro-Christian. So we have to, put in all this extra stuff that's historically inaccurate and imply things that were never implied by anybody. But because we want to show this as, he truly wasn't Constantine truly was great in battle, in mercy, in his intellect, in tying the empire together once again. He could have been seen as the second coming of Augustus. It's just stupid. People drag their crappy agendas into history. I hold history very close to my heart. Maybe even sacred. I love history. Screwing around with it and putting in your insecurities into it is, to me, it's almost blasphemous. No. Well, there's many versions of history, and history changes with how you view it. No matter how you view the Constitution, it was written in 1776. No matter how you view the Civil War, it was still fought between 1861 and 1865. Lincoln was still shot by Booth. Well, no, Lincoln could have been shot by George Washington. No, he couldn't have. So that's my spiel on Constantine. It's ridiculous that history... Well, I think you'd expect it from somebody who has Ancient Aliens and reality shows on the History Channel. Take it easy. Peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. Constantine, even though he was baptized as an Arian, he truly was a great man, and he was coming towards Christianity. He was on the path. I see him as Orthodox. I see him as part of the church. If nothing else, he was a humanitarian. He issued the Edict of Milan, tolerance to all religions, everyone. He didn't persecute the pagans. He just directed money to the churches. And he let the churches decide what they wanted to believe. The Council of Nicaea, he didn't really say anything. He just suggested the term homoousia. And then when the bishop, he had everybody sign it, and when the bishops turned to Arianism, he turned to Arianism. He was looking to the church as a guide at the end of his life. He wasn't meddling around in church theology. He certainly didn't assemble the Bible. That didn't happen until like 50 years after he died. Peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. Kind of irritating. Oh yeah, I'm naked today. And it's this. there's a program that the History Channel did, and I rewatched it for the second time, and it made my blood boil even worse. It's about Constantine. They show Constantine as this very agitable, whiny guy. Everything they say in there, if you listen to the words the narrator is saying, is true in the events and what took place. But then they add on all this stuff heavily implied in the way the actor acts. That's ridiculous and totally ahistorical. They show Constantine, which is modern-day England. There were always fights from the Picts and the Celts and all these people, and the piracy that was happening from the Celts in Ireland. And Britain had a long history of revolts, like Boudica. He was on he was on the barbarian edge of the empire, and then he swept through. Now, many historians criticize Constantine for being a very cold, shrewd man who was an opportunist. But even the critics say he was valiant in battle. He was brave, not fanatical, and that he was a great warrior. Constantine as like a frustrated Michael Palin who's always screaming, and who's like a fanatic who's like trying to pray to God and commanding God to do things. And no, Constantine was born to a general, and I believe it was a slave or a dancing girl or something like that. People are going to equate that with Theodore. It's not Theodore. He was born of Italic blood, Latin blood, basically. This is before the Germans. This is over 100 years before the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Huns, the Lombards, the Franks, before any of those came through, or even the marauding Normans and Vikings. So YouTube changed its format and screwy. And soon I'll be doing a video with New to Christ, so check his channel. Still going through the messages, trying to sort stuff out. I'm still in the middle of reading 3 different books, so those people who sent me a book, don't worry, I'm getting through it. I don't want to remark on anything yet, because I've been jumping from one to one to one to one, different ones. But I really appreciate those. I actually dig all of them. For the person who's coming to Chicago, please send me a message. And I pretty much got the Charlemagne mustache going right here, because when I shaved my beard down to a goatee, I accidentally took out this part, so I got the Charlemagne or Southern General look. But I wanted to talk on something, which is that rape, pillage, and plunder, which brought blonde hair and blue eyes to Italy. Now, yeah, I know through genetics there's naturally occurring blonde hair and blue eyes, just like throughout the Middle East there is also. But Constantine wasn't a pale-skinned Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxons were still in Denmark at the time. Denmark and Sweden and Finland. They didn't even get to Britain yet to rename it England, Angleland, and Wessex and Sussex, which is South Saxon, West Saxon, Essex is East Saxon, dividing up into the kingdom of Northumbria and Kent and all that crap. Constantine was born to a general in Dalmatia, that's modern-day Serbia. He grew up around Londinium in Britain.